Okay, how's everybody doing? Good. All right. So, interesting part of the week for us here, really in training camp, to try to do a little bit of a switch of mentality here and get ready for Buffalo, like we would as close as possible to a normal game week. Obviously, things are kind of a little bit condensed, so it's kind of a Wednesday/Thursday in our world from that standpoint. Trying to get onto a normal, regular in-season schedule the best we can from that standpoint. Understanding that we are still in camp and we're still working on a lot of things. From a Detroit Lions standpoint. So you'll see a little bit of mixture of Buffalo work. You're going to see some offense, defensive work back and forth a little bit from some situational stuff that we want to improve on, along with the fundamental work. And continuing just to try to get some of those guys back out there. Some of the guys, that you saw yesterday that were out there, putting them back into practice and kind of trying to put them in the right mode. Again, we just got to be careful and be smart about bringing those guys back and not just throwing them into the same sort of volume that everybody else is doing there out on the field. It's not a smart way to go about it. But I think from that standpoint, yesterday was a good day of work for us to get better and some of the things that we needed to do. But it was good this morning to kind of get back in the groove of taking a look at an opponent and talking about Coach McDermott and Brian Dable and Leslie Frazier and, all the guys that they have out at Buffalo and some of the similarities, that we've seen from previous teams. Then obviously I would say from a defensive perspective, their defense being different than what we've seen maybe the last couple of weeks of preseason, and how we have to transition from one week to the next and get a different mentality and a mindset, knowing that, Buffalo's defense is very similar to Carolina's and how, they're trying to build it out there, which is good for us to kind of be able to turn the page. That's what we have to do every single week. So it's a good start as far as that's concerned. I'd say on the other side of the ball with Coach Dable, it's really, it's kind of 3 weeks in a row of a similar kind of tree of coaches. So all have their own different spins on it between Josh and Billy O and Brian, but good for us to try to, connect the dots as far as that's concerned, because that'll happen through the course of the season. So kind of an interesting week for us. A lot of foundational work for us of how to handle the in-season schedule, how to handle studying, how to transition from, week to week and day to day and understand what's important for that day and get out of the, installation mode of just normal kind of, regular install of training camp. So, good from that standpoint again, but still in a major evaluation, phase of what we're trying to do and the guys that are out there. Added Jordan Lastly this morning, wide receiver. So, again, trying to always just bring in guys that we think can go out and compete. Not that, Stockton did a good job while he was here too, but just, continually trying to put as many guys out on the field as we feel possible to try to get a look at this stage in the game. So, probably just open up the questions from that standpoint. We're kind of in the middle of a couple of things yet.
How much is the film study and watching Buffalo part of this week, and how does that add to the evaluation process, seeing how guys process that information, can study all that goes with that?
Yeah, I'd say it's a really good question, because we did actually start that last night from a meeting standpoint in squad, where we go through the overview of the Buffalo organization and along with that trying to prepare those guys to hone in on the exact players to study. A little bit difficult, obviously, with large rosters on both sides of the ball. But certainly for us, something that we try to go through a normal week and say, hey, this is what a Monday would look like for you. This is what a Tuesday would look like for you. This is what a Wednesday looks like for us when we get back into the building. And this is what we have to study. And these are the areas that we're going to look at, and try to lay that out the best we could for them, so that they can, they got to run through a practice trial of that stuff. There's different cut-ups that they watch, and then we'll transfer from really early in the week watching game tape on an opponent. Then we go to like a cut-up mode where we're watching very individual specific areas of an opponent. And then we actually transfer back into a game tape mode where we're trying to do that with the install calls that we have put in for that week. So there's a pretty intricate process that we go through that we're trying to do the best we can to get that in really a short window.
Too, I was going to ask, because you mentioned that yesterday too, just how some people don't know how to study, you don't want to assume that. So what's sort of the outline maybe of what you tell guys how to study?
Sure.
And how, big is the jump from guys coming in from college and what they have to learn the way they study it?
Yeah, I would say I would totally agree, because it's a huge jump coming in from college, and it's probably a huge jump coming in from different programs too. We're trying to do everything we can to maximize the amount of time they have to look at it. I think with the college restrictions that they have today, and the amount of hours that they're actually allowed to spend in some of those situations, it's very different for them when they come to the NFL, as far as, they have to just understand the time that they would spend on schoolwork or things like that are now, studying football. And, it's not that it's an issue, but it is different as far as scheduling is concerned. And there's just certain ways to make sure it's almost like, you have to study ahead before you walk in the next day, and understanding how important that is, so that when we get into the building, we're going to move at a very fast pace. So, if it's an early down day, the film that needs to be watched the night before you come in, so that you're prepared for that, that day. The issue, that we just run into, we got to try to explain to the guys is there's kind of really not an opportunity to go back and redo something. So when we do it once during the week, it has to be really at the highest level, because we're just going to move into another area, whether it's early downs, third downs, red area, 2-minute, it just builds as the week goes. So that kind of pre-next day preparation is really critical for our players to understand.
That's what, Wednesday they study, Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Thursday,
Yep. Just like that, just kind of making sure that when you come in the building in the morning, understanding, again, we got to tell them the information they need to know for the next day so they can get a head start on it. But it's really important for them to be in front of it so that when they come in, the information that we give them goes that much faster.
I know you mentioned after last season you were going to evaluate kind of everything internally. Do you still do that, like from the coaching staff perspective? Like what's working now as you're getting players prepared that could carry over to short weeks in the regular season, like the Thanksgiving week or the Monday night game? Does any of that still come into play?
Absolutely. And part of that is, even just coming back from a longer trip where we were away for a little while, and, where to put the player day off and what it looks like the next day, and how much kind of the taxing of a week of worth of work takes on the players, and are we rested? Are we not rested? Monitoring the workloads that they're having through the different systems that we use through sports science. So we take this opportunity to actually do it because, we are on a short week. If you think about it, we're kind of on a little bit of a time crunch, but that's okay. It's training camp, so it's all right. But we will look at that and say, all right, how do we best prepare to get ready for the game?
Do you expect Stafford to play at all?
I expect all of our guys to prepare and be ready to play. That's the bottom line. That's what we do every single week. And I think every coach in the NFL does that. And that's the approach you have to take from a mental and physical standpoint. And, game time, that's for the coaches and the players to work together to try to decide what's going to be best for, everybody in that situation. But we don't, it's not anything where I earmark out ahead of time and say, hey, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this. It's got to be fluid from that standpoint. And but the preparation all has to be the same. That's what's got to be consistent, just to make sure that we're ready to go.
As much experience as he had, do you feel like he doesn't necessarily have to take a snap in the preseason?
You know what? I think, obviously he's a veteran quarterback. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that do everything differently in teams. And I've been around teams where the quarterbacks haven't played at all in preseason. They played in regular season. I've been where they played all the preseason games. It's really individually based. And I think with Matthew, we're just trying to do a good job of making sure that we're balancing the right amount of practice reps with game reps and what we feel as far as competitive reps against opponents, which we've been lucky enough to have here for the last 2 weeks. And then we'll push forward from there.
Receiver group, you obviously added another name to that room today. Beyond the Marvin, Kenny, and Danny, what have you seen from that next tier of guys as you're building the depth chart, especially coming out of the Houston game? Where are you seeing some positives?
Yeah, I'd say, again, once you kind of move into the next group of competition right there too, the big part of it also is part of special teams. That's also kind of the dual role players that you have to have on your roster that can, go in and perform on offense and also special teams wise have a big role. And I think the group of guys that's kind of next that's been competing understands that. So it's been interesting to see those guys, and evaluate them in both areas, obviously guys like Andy Jones and Lacey and just those guys that have been able to produce in both special teams and offense to make themselves as valuable as possible. And then we'll also try to move them positionally into different spots on offense from the wide receiver position itself to see the versatility that they would have within that unit too. And I would say that right now, all the group is competing very hard. I think, we're just trying to find consistency there with the group from that standpoint to find just kind of every down, every snap has been the same. Right now it's really good competition, which has been good.
What does Leslie offer on teams, if anything, that you know?
Yeah, I would say just in general, he's very talented, guys. He's got a great skill set. So we'll have to see how it fits as far as our scheme and system when he goes out there and competes. This will be kind of our first go around. He does have a little bit of a history background with some of our coaches who have been with him previous. So that's kind of a good insight for us there. And then we'll just get him out there and see how it progresses as we go. We've got a little bit behind the 8 ball, a little bit, as far as trying to make up time with learning, but we've got some time left in camp, which is good to get a good evaluation.
Yeah, as you kind of transition from camp to trying to do the regular season mode thing, what do you feel like maybe you learned from last year that you ended up taking to this year's camp that maybe you thought worked better, helped, hurt, perhaps?
In training camp mode or
in
season mode?
in training camp mode that you, because that was such a big
yeah.
how our camp was.
I would say, obviously, I think the biggest thing for everybody would probably be camp was just a little bit more familiar for everybody, from that standpoint. I think everyone kind of understood what was expected and what we were going to try to do and how we were going to try to do things, which was obviously very different last year compared to what was done previously, but that's fine. It's all good. And it was similar year 2, which is always nice. I think there's a comfort level in that in regards to all of it. I changed some of the meeting times, some of the things that I did, I would say post practice. Kind of tried to group some things a little bit differently that I thought helped the learning process a little bit better from that standpoint. So that was one of the things I really took a look at from that standpoint. Certainly practice for the most part while we're out there grinding, we're going. The schedule was set up a little bit differently this year than it was last year. The West Coast trip was a little bit different, to have to go out there and then come back and kind of try to, deal with all that travel, but it was good for us to go through. We're obviously going to have to travel to the West Coast during the regular season. So that was important for us from that standpoint. And then really just being able to have the practice schedule set up the way we did this year with the 2 teams against each other, knowing the competition that we were going to be able to see and the competitive reps we were going to be able to see, I would say allowed us maybe outside of those practices to maybe take a little bit of a different approach to some of our own internal practices at that point, because we knew what we were going to get very specifically with those 2 teams, which was great.
Yeah, it's about special teams. Just 2 things real quick. One is about, you stress it probably more than most coaches. What about is the big plays just kind of reverberate with the team, the little things like just getting leverage or getting the right angle. If you don't get, you might force a penalty, the guy has to grab and stuff like that.
Sure.
How important is all of that mix of things?
Yeah, I think it's critically important. I think those are things we call the details, and we got to make sure that we pay attention to the details and we never let little things become big things, because inevitably if you ignore the little things, they do become big things. And that's what we're talking about when we get into those situations. So it may be something where it's simple as a proper angle or attack angle or approach angle for a block or a tackle, either case. And if your angle's off slightly, then your footwork's off slightly. And if that guy's a little bit better athlete than you are, then they have an advantage. And it's about 1 or 2 steps. And that's the difference in this league. If a guy can get a step or 2 on you, they can create space enough to, either get a big play or prevent a big play. And those small details we'll try to coach as much as possible. And I think you try to put the players in as many of those situations as possible, because we're never going to be able to get it exactly what it's going to be like in the game, but at least if we can get some muscle memory and some reactionary quickness kind of down in multiple different scenarios, then, give them the best chance to do the same thing when they're out there in the game. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Prater real quick.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about too much, which maybe is a good thing when it comes to a kicker,
Yeah.
but what kind of luxury is that for you to have a guy that's so consistent and kind of know what to expect out of that?
I'd say just in general, Prater is he's a great guy. He's a great teammate. He's someone that honestly, he and I started a conversation immediately after the season last year. And I think that it was really just awesome for me to be able to kind of grow that relationship and build that relationship. He's such a solid, he's like a rock, he's just, exactly what you're going to get every single day with the guy, which is awesome. He's consistent and very professional, and his approach is meticulous, which I can really appreciate from the, professional way that he approaches everything. But I would say just in general, having good conversation with him through the course of the off season, not about football, just about everything else. And all of that is, I would say he's one of the guys that I really lean on for a lot of conversation. I think sometimes specialists and kickers and punters and snappers, they're around a lot of things, and people don't really understand they're there, but they listen and they see a lot. And that's really good for me, because that can really help as far as trying to just get a pulse of where we're at with everything and going from there. So he's been great. And then obviously on the field, just the way that he approaches everything every single week is awesome, and he's really, from a kicker standpoint, the great part about it is it's a very good open conversation piece to say, hey, how do you feel about this? Where do you think we're at here? Just from his own physical standpoint and where he feels like he's at in each particular game or each particular situation within the game. And that's the biggest part, is having that really clean, good back and forth communication, because you just don't want to be off page with that, because then, it's either you miss a long field goal attempt or, just something from that standpoint where every single one of those plays is a situational play, and you just want to make sure you're on the same page.